What's going on, everybody? I'm Jiffy Nano, and today I have the next evolution of my old Amara Bloodbound build using the new skills and weapons from the Director's Cut DLC. So this version of the build, which I'm now calling Frostbound, is one of the strongest I've put out, and it can do pretty much anything with ease, even the takedowns in true takedown mode. The only weak point for this build is bossing, and even then with a good set of monarchs or backburners that should be pretty easy as well, so here are the skill trees. As you can see, we almost completely leave out the green tree. Revelation used to deal damage through ties that bind, but in the latest patch they made it so it doesn't, so I didn't even bother going that far down. Instead, we go for Unweave the Rainbow, the Cryo element for our action skill, and Expedite in the purple tree. And after all of these changes, this build still works a lot like my Bloodbound build, and the only big difference with it is that we're focusing on freezing enemies with our Phase Grasp and splash damage weapons. We are using ties that bind, and you're going to want to use the Cryo element pretty much all the time. Cryo is really good against armor and normal HP, but it isn't all that great against shields, so if you pair this with shock or radiation, you can tear through all types of health pretty easily. Also, there's not many enemies that are resistant to Cryo, and the ones who are easily taken out by other means, or they're a boss and it doesn't matter. We are also using Expedite as our augment. This gives us increased cooldown based on how many enemies we kill with our action skill. With Ties That Bind, you can kill entire crowds, giving you a bunch of stacks all at once. You don't really need this, but I like it more than others because it doesn't reduce the damage of ties, and you can get your grasp back in like 3 to 5 seconds with a good group kill. So for your weapons, you want to focus on splash, so use things like the Flipper, Plasma Coil, Contain Blast, Chaos Sun, and the Beacon. There are quite a few good splash weapons, but most of them are SMGs, so the Beacon and the Contain Blast are good choices. Now you don't necessarily need to use splash weapons, but Unweave the Rainbow only gives you bonus damage against frozen targets with either splash or melee, and Heavy Rain gives you increased splash damage, so using splash is the best bet damage-wise, but you can get away with non-splash weapons. I would just highly advise using splash weapons. We are still using the Phaserker in this build. In the newest patch they said that they removed Fake Grasping, but that only applied to anointments. You can still use Fake Grasp to gain Do Harm and Violent Tapestry stacks, which is really helpful because they nerf Ties That Bind, and only weapon and melee damage is transferred to the linked enemies now, so the damage output is still high, but not nearly as high as it used to be. So Do Harm is really helpful there. Violent Tapestry makes it easier to freeze enemies, so you can get the bonus damage against them. So yeah, Fake Grasping is not actually removed like they said it was, but it does not work with anointments anymore, so let's move on to those. Because you can't use action skill and anoints with Fake Grasping anymore, the anoints you want to use are 300 over 90 and consecutive hits. The new one that's 100% extra damage while Phase Grasp is active isn't bad, but it only works if you have the weapon out when you start your action skill, and it goes away if you swap away and you lose it. It's not as good as consecutive hits, which will have a much higher uptime, especially with all the ticks of cryo you'll be dealing. The 300% bonus damage while enemies are over 90% health still works like it has with ties, and all of the linked enemies will be taking 300% more damage as long as they're above 90% HP. This anoint applies to all damage dealt, not just gun damage like it says it does, so that one's a really good choice as well. Overall, this build is incredibly strong, easily blowing through the takedowns, with the only pain point being the bosses in the Guardian takedown because they are tanky as hell. This build destroys mobs, easily shattering through crowds of enemies. I've made a lot of versions of the Bloodbound build, and while this doesn't speed kill bosses, it's still one of the most reliable builds I've come up with, and this version is just a flat upgrade to mobbing efficiency and crowd control with all the cryo we end up dealing. All this being said, if you don't have the DLC, the normal Bloodbound build is still super solid, and you should be able to do all the content in the game just as well as you could before. So let me know what you all think of the build down in the comments, and if you are on PC, you can download the save from my Discord, link in the description. Console friends, crossplay should be coming soon, so we should be able to get you all the gear from these builds much more easily in the future, but for now, I wish you luck farming. Also, all my builds are theory crafted and tested over my live stream on Twitch, link in the description. I would love to see you there and talk more about RPGs and looters. If you enjoyed the video, consider hitting the like button. If you didn't, go ahead and dislike. If you want to see more videos like this, consider subscribing and hitting that bell so you see my future uploads. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. That was 1019, something like that. It was 1019,000K, or